I would say he was underpaid for a point guard. If he does develop into even a better player, now he's averaging this year. He averaged about 16-5. If he averages about, he gets better every single year, and he, at his max, he's averaging between 22 and 24 points a game, and he's giving the Knicks 5 or 6 assists. I mean, he's only 25. He's not even in the prime yet. I think 2 years from now, you would say you consider him in his prime. So if he gets to that point, I mean, making, the amount of money he's making, what is it, 22, 23 million? That's not a lot of money for a point guard.
It starts around 27.
Yeah.
But no, and the cap is likely to go up in a couple of years with the media deal, the new media rights deal kicking in. So it's the money for, when you're talking about this stuff from like a salary cap perspective, it's not like, oh, it's so much money, I can't believe this guy, blah blah blah. It's like, no, it's chips at the poker table.
Right.
It's like you used this much of your stack on that move, and that like puts you at risk of not having enough for things that happen later. And so I didn't, if the Knicks had otherwise kind of clean books, sure. But I think, they have the Randall contract is not looking great right now, though he has a chance to rehab that value. They're about to have to sign RJ Barrett to an extension. They've got, they cleared some of them out to in terms of Burks and Noel to clear the space. But now you're talking, it's not just the money you paid him, it's also the stuff you had to trade to create the space to so it's much like Dallas. It's the sort of the series of moves that when you say, okay, that one individually made sense, that one individually, then you look back and see at the total kind of what you did, and it's like, I don't love what I got out of that. That's sort of that's my perspective on it, and I'm willing to be completely wrong. Like Jalen Brunson, frankly, has never been a player that I've been a huge fan of, and he's proven me wrong several different times already. He's already a much better NBA player than I thought he would be, so he could do it again, and I could look stupid, and that wouldn't be the first time. So I'm okay with that.
So you mentioned in the last question that you think a lot of teams try to go for the guy rather than going for a good piece. And obviously, you being in the Bucks front office, you saw how they built their team, and they built their team in a lot of good depth around Giannis and Middleton, guys like that. Now, a lot of the other extremes have been teams like the Nets, teams like the Lakers that have tried to build the big threes again all over, and they haven't worked to some extent. Do you think that kind of concept will fade, and teams will try to build more like the Bucks and teams like that?
I mean, I think when people contrast the Bucks to that, I think that's selling Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday a little bit short. I mean, I'm probably biased here, but like, Drew Holiday has been one of my favorite players for a long time, and I think he remains one of the more underrated two-way players in the league. And Chris Middleton is, if he was in a different market, would be recognized as one of like the premier shot makers in the league. But the fact that he's in a smaller market and is overshadowed by Giannis, he was at times like the most important player in the playoffs for the Bucks last year. So, and missing him this year was one of the most important factors in Boston beating them. That contrast is maybe a little overdone. I will say that the idea of get a bunch of superstars together or a couple superstars together and then have a bunch of minimum guys and vets who are past it, stuff like that, that doesn't work anymore. Because the playoffs are too competitive. Teams are too good at finding, if you've got to put a player out there who isn't up to that level of play, teams are too good at the top level, are too good at exploiting that. I think we saw that with like Miami a little. Their depth started to get hurt a little bit, and Max Strus is a decent enough player if you're asking for him to give you 12 minutes a game. If you're starting him in the Eastern Conference Finals, you run into that. In terms of the get a guy, not the guy, I can give an example from the guy who's been important. It was Pat Connaughton. When we signed him, we had a list of, I don't remember who exactly was on the list, but it was 8 to 10 kind of shooting guard, wing type players who were going to be available. We liked them all around the same. Some of them were going to get paid. Some of them were going to get like mid-level exceptions and stuff like that. But we knew that a couple of them would end up being available on minimum contracts. So we were like, let's not, go crazy after and pick one. We like all these guys. Any one of them will help our team. Let's wait and see. And, see what shakes out for us. And it happened to be that the guy who ended up, it's sort of like in the draft, a guy falls to you. Very similar in free agency. Pat Connaughton was that guy, and he's been a very successful player and has been a key part of the Bucks for the last 4 or 5 years.
We are talking to author of the Midrange Theory and athletic NBA analyst Seth Partnow. Seth, we talk about, again, back to the free agents, and we were talking about the Malcolm Brogdon move, which sent him to the Celtics. The Celtics didn't really trade anything for him. I don't know what the Pacers are thinking. Maybe the Pacers are trying to open up space where they can bring in another superstar. Who knows what the Pacers are thinking? I thought at the trade deadline, they won the trade deadline with the trade with Sacramento. I think they absolutely fleeced Sacramento, and they put themselves right in position where this is one of the more up-and-coming, offensive and defensive teams in the NBA with Rick Carlisle there. Before we get into the Kevin Durant situation, because that's the most interesting thing right now in the NBA, what are your thoughts so far in free agency this year? What really stood out to you the most? What move really stood out the most as far as what you've seen in the last couple of days?
The biggest single move was probably the Brunson signing. The trend that's interesting is just all of the kind of huge extensions that have been signed. That's Beal and Levine and Darius Garland. That's a little different situation because it's a lot different giving a rookie a guy who's coming off his rookie deal like the 25% max as opposed to a guy who's deep into his career at the 35% max. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier in terms of translating wins to dollars. 3 wins a season difference in terms of how much you need to produce, and that's it's a huge amount. That's like almost another starter level of player difference between the two. So that's a big one. And then obviously like teams continuing to just throw, I don't want to say throw, but being willingness to put draft picks into deals. Atlanta trading for DeJounte Murray, and obviously Minnesota trading for Rudy Gobert.
Crazy move by them.
Maybe. Like I mentioned, Drew Holiday being one of the more underrated players in the NBA. I think the disconnect between how people talk about Rudy Gobert and the impact he has on the game is pretty massive. Like the Timberwolves were a team that occasionally struggle on defense. Until he ages out of that level of player, you have a top 10 defense if you have Rudy Gobert on your team. Like that's maybe it doesn't hold up as well in the playoffs, but for a team like Minnesota, like where have you been? Like, okay, we have a top 10 defense and we have Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. We can do some things with that.
They also have D'Angelo Russell too. Look at his face.
Yeah. That maybe he is still on the roster. It's I think that I would.
I guess you don't like him very much.
He's very Jalen Brunson-esque. I could see.
I would. Let's put it this way: if they had Jalen Brunson in that spot instead of D'Angelo Russell, I would be even higher on the Timberwolves than I am. So, but no. So it's a lot. It's a big gamble, but I think teams are seeing you don't win the championship without taking risks. Now, whether the risks are good or not, I think to some extent time will tell. But I do like the fact that teams are like screw it, let's go.
Right. So in general, like you're seeing all these big extensions as it is, and also coming earlier for younger players. One, with their current teams, do you see that kind of thing being a new trend where it seems like guys are staying with their teams rather than trying to explore the big markets or trying to team up? And also, can you see a situation where the NBA becomes like baseball, where guys get starting to paid earlier in their time because young players are the wave of the league?
So I think part of it is the previous CBA to this one made extensions for really for high-level veteran players, just made it not worth it for the player to do. So many more guys hit free agency. Now the extension rules have changed to the point where it just, from a player standpoint, you can lock in guaranteed 9-figure money much easier. Like, 150, 200, $250 million guaranteed money going out, 4 or 5 years. You can do that much easier now. And so from a player standpoint, yeah, let's do it. From a team standpoint, it seems like it's a good thing. If the player is going to hold up, however, and this is something that's going to come up a lot in the next CBA negotiation, is, we've now seen with Ben Simmons and now Kevin Durant, a couple instances where guys like, okay, I got my extension, now trade me. And that's something that the owners are not going to be very happy, and I think justifiably so. Like we signed you to we agreed on this big deal because we agree that you're going to be on our team and to be a big part of our team, and you turn right around and it's like, yeah, thanks for the money, now get me out of here. Like that's not tenable if that continues to be a regular thing. You had a second half of that question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, players are getting like paid kind of earlier, younger, kind of like a little bit like baseball to an extent, but not to the same extreme. But do you think like more teams will have that kind of system where they pay them earlier before they get too costly?
I think so. Teams have gotten smarter about how they structure, for example, contracts for second round picks so that they can, get them at reasonable rates if they're good after their third year. You saw the Nuggets do that with Nikola Jokic. If we keep him for a fourth year, he's an unrestricted free agent. Let's just not do that. Let's take care of him a year early. And obviously that has worked out very well for them. I think on the other side, we're also seeing, there are contracts around the league where I'm wondering at what point people are going to start to say, these 4 or 5 year extensions at huge money for guys, in or entering their early 30s. These are bad. You can't win those deals, and then you're left, 3-4 years down the road, you're left with, it's John Wall had to get bought out. Russell Westbrook is where he is, and I think we're going to end up with a lot of those deals around the league. And I think the teams that are avoid those and are able to kind of to go after the younger up and coming players, the players who still have room for development, I think that's I think that is a better model for success than, well, Bradley Beal's pretty good, let's sign him to all we can and then hope we get lightning in a bottle and put the right team around him.